It's on our VRBO, property number 1564093. It's advertising $1,000 per night, $1 million mansion, best neighborhood, Michigan Lakefront. So, I think we can find the advertisement that's enough proof that they're violating zoning laws. So that's one to check.
Thank you. Is there any other citizen to be heard tonight on an agenda item or non-agenda item? If not, we will close that section of the agenda and move on to new business. The first item for new business is to consider concrete grinding criteria number 37 for 2019 sidewalk pavement. Oh, policy meeting.
Recall we've had some conversations in the past during discussions about previous sidewalk programs, but also I believe with some members of the pedestrian safety committee or other village groups about incorporating an option for grinding to reduce trip hazards into our sidewalk program rather than the previous policy which had been simple replacement of the slab as the only option. So what you have in front of you is a draft policy or draft guidelines to address to identify sidewalk stones that would be eligible for grinding within our sidewalk program. You also have a copy of the current sidewalk replacement or concrete replacement criteria that was adopted by the village board in 1995 and has been used since that point. So it's staff's approach, I guess would be the way to put it, that the concrete grinding criteria would act as a supplement to that concrete replacement criteria.
Is it time sensitive? Because I really believe, we did ask questions tonight, but I also would like it to go into if possible, Public Works, just because it is a new policy, or is it? We've never had a policy on sidewalk grinding. We've had on sidewalk replacement, but it is.
That's right.
So, thank you. Is there any questions tonight? I have a few, but then if we feel like we need to refer it, we can. We don't have to.
Seems pretty straightforward. I mean, the board's talked about it a number of times. It could maybe alternative save some money environmentally with the materials, but it seemed pretty straightforward. Opportunity
Can I ask my questions tonight?
to save residents money.
Did you have questions?
Well, I was just, if we're going to jump into questions on this, so I'm looking at this, it looks like it's an alternative replacement. It repairs some of the cracks in the sidewalks.
No. To be very clear, grinding, the purpose of grinding is to address heaved or displaced slabs. So it would address trip hazards. It does not address here or anywhere else defects in the actual concrete.
Would you always replace those trip hazards? Because
Previously we did, that's how we
always,
addressed.
so, okay,
Always.
that's in our policy. I just read it differently, I thought we didn't.
So previously we replaced entire sidewalks in order to alleviate these trip hazards.
Yes.
Trustee Mentor?
I didn't understand on that concrete replacement criteria. Number one, sidewalks with pieces that are loose or missing at or near control, I get control joints or between, within the center 4 feet of a walkway. What does that mean?
It's, there is, what would be, so if you have a corner that the edge was broken off or was cracked, that would be permissible to allow it to remain in that condition if it were not within the center 4 feet of the 5 feet. Because, typically people aren't walking right on the edge, so it doesn't become a liability.
Okay, I get it now, yeah, thank you.
Trustee Moore?
Sorry. So I noticed that the project cost estimate is $5,000. So is that, how reliable is that estimate? It just seems
Is
to
a
be-
complete estimate,
Okay.
guess, based on what we've observed in the past, not necessarily in this particular area, but just our general knowledge of the sidewalk condition in general throughout the village. We will be doing a field assessment later this month. And at that time, we will likely have a better number, but that's staff's estimate based on what we believe we know at this point.
Did we buy the grinder?
No, we will be, we are proposing to incorporate that as part of the entire replacement program. Most large concrete contractors have that equipment and are able to do that.
Okay, so they'll do it.
So which, the concrete replacement criteria, which one does it replace? 1 through 3?
None. That will remain in effect. The
Okay.
grinding criteria will be added as a supplement.
I understand, but where in 1 through 8 does it say we replace concrete slabs for tripping hazards?
Differential settlement, number 4.
Number 4. So wouldn't that have to go away? Because it's not, so in other words, if that's the criteria to replace concrete, would you want to modify that policy or that criteria?
So that, if you approve this, this would be a supplement to that number 4. And if you look at the new number 4 under the grinding criteria, it says that if there's vertical displacement between 1 inch or 1/2 inch and 1.5 inches, then we can grind it. So I understand what you're saying. We can certainly work with Nathan on the wording of that, but the intent is not to have to replace the original criteria. It's to be-
Right. I'm just,
I believe I understand.
so policy number 37 is a new policy. I'm all in favor of, as we are moving forward with cleaning up some of our policy developments, and it's not specifically for this one, I'm just in general, I'd rather amend an existing policy and put everything in there so you have one place to look than to try to continue to just keep adding policies and trying to reference them. And I would ask that if the board will allow it to go to Public Works, that we work on that, just to get it into one spot. My main questions, though, were about assessments. The board has voted that we currently assess sidewalks, and the way this is set up, it's, well, if you want to grind it, the resident says, yes, now we are paying 100% of the cost. So we are actually increasing a budgetary line item, which isn't necessarily noted in the fiscal note, but every time someone would like to grind. Whereas maybe we really need to look at the method of financing, and maybe assessments don't make sense anymore because it's equal if it was just all on the tax roll. So I only bring that up because there's a disincentive of the village to want the resident to pick grinding. We pay 100, 1,000, whereas before they paid 100%. So I get that. I just don't think it's fair that every taxpayer, so a resident has the authority to say, nope, I want you to grind, and now every other taxpayer is paying just for that certain slab because of the method of financing we've set up.
Point taken, absolutely. I would have 2 responses to that additional information. One is, as it relates to replacement, grinding is considerably less expensive.
Right.
So, I mean, we're estimating, $5,000 would cover all the grinding requests in a program year. Estimating it, right? The other thing would be, the reality of it is that
So that's
there's a relatively small percentage of stones out there that are in perfect condition, and the only issue they have is a trip hazard.
Right, which brings me to my first question, which was, I feel like somewhere in here I read that basically it's not going to be done a lot. And I felt like the intent of what the residents had requested, and also that we discussed at the board, was that this was an alternative to save money that would be accessed more.
But understood, but staff's perspective on that, from a liability and infrastructure management standpoint, is that the village has a responsibility to ensure that this infrastructure is in good condition. And the overriding factor should not be whether, someone wants to save money on sidewalk replacement. If it meets the criteria for replacement, then it needs to be replaced under all previous policies and everyone's general agreement.
So,
That is what it is.
and I never meant for it to, when we talked about it, we talked about just thinking taxpayers, like, if we can grind rather than, forget who pays, resident or not, but if we can grind rather than replace full slabs, we, the village, would save money. And the way the financing is set up right now, it's a little cumbersome to not be discussing that piece, because you have to send out a letter, and it's only, it would be easier to have a full discussion of, what do we want to do with our sidewalk program now that we do have grinding, and then we're going to incorporate it. And the cost of the grinder is incorporated in our sidewalk replacement contract, correct?
But, I mean, the overriding issue is that the goal of the program is to create safe, walkable sidewalks. And we have criteria in place that govern what does and does not need to be replaced. The addition of the grinding is to give residents an option to utilize that method if everything else is in good condition.
And I would just, because the conversation, and then I will call on Trustee Bachhorst and Kate, I just want to finish my thought. Because it's the dichotomy of, if it was a village, if we were paying for it either way, I would want as a policymaker to say, always do it. Now we're giving the resident the chance to, like, you get to decide. It's a policy. Do we want to grind when we can, rather than replace? And if it's yes, giving the resident the opportunity. I mean, this is a village-wide program. So the mechanism was very awkward to me.
But we're talking about $5,000 on approximately a $250,000 program every.
And that's only 10 a year, I understand. Trustee Bachhorst.
I will move to approval of the sidewalk grinding policy as a supplement to the 1995 concrete replacement criteria.
Second.
Trustee McKay? Did you have your
So now we're in discussion?
Yes,
Or-
yes.
I just wanted to, Ms. Bushlick, is there anything in the policy that you feel like, you have to compromise on, or is not, ideal practice, or is any kind of burden to the department?
No, we have our personal opinions on the longevity or the impact, whether grinding long-term is a good thing for the condition of the sidewalk. You didn't ask us that, so we didn't address that. But I think that what we've come up with here is a good approach and a good compromise to what people have asked us to look into and do.
Thank you.
It's a legitimate response.
And Trustee Mehta?
So, I have a question, if everything's perfect, just displaced, and so we grind, but it's another 8 or 10 years till we're back at that.
Yep.
Yeah, so what, is there any, what's the effect of grinding on the longevity of that particular sidewalk?
It certainly has a negative impact on the life of the stone, the slab. That's why we have this, that's why we proposed that any displacement of greater than 1.5 inches would not be a candidate for grinding, because when you get further than that, you've removed half of the surface of the stone. And if you've seen, I'm sure we've all seen them, right? You've seen areas where trapezers have been ground, or in some cases sawed. And you have your finished concrete at the top. As you go lower, you have the heavier stone.
Right.
And once you expose that aggregate, you're definitely reducing the life of that concrete, because you're exposing the larger aggregate to the elements, and it will deteriorate faster. Is it likely to do it, in a 2 to 6 year period? Probably not. I mean, I think if we continue on a 10-year cycle, we're probably okay to catch that the next time around.
But just as a follow-up, I think that type of displacement would normally be tree roots, right?
Oftentimes, probably the vast majority of the time it is, yes.
Right, so
Sometimes
I
it's
wonder if
settling
we
because of
have to,
underground utilities.
I wonder if we have to maybe follow those particular, especially since we're just starting, like follow the ones we grind? Because I'm guessing the tree roots, within 10 years is probably gonna make some place it again, I don't know.
Yeah. And we,
I mean, I'm in favor of grinding, but I think it's good to have that option,
Yeah.
for people, but it does kind of change.
It's an excellent point, and we will certainly keep a watch list of everything that had been,
Right.
Leanne, isn't this, when we discussed it originally, this was like the interim, so it wasn't like every 10 years we look and we say, is there any tripping hazards we're gonna grind? It was more of, if there's a trip, you get some calls and there's a tripping hazard, we do get calls, and we'll go out and we'll grind so that we can continue that life cycle over 10 years.
that was one approach. We talked about a couple of different approaches.
That's where I was in full support, so that was the intent, was to expand the life, to lengthen the lifespan of that concrete slab because it was so much cheaper. So when we looked at it fiscally, that's what made the most sense, in my opinion. And so now there's a change, there's a shift here.
You're expanding the window of time that you keep that slab in a condition that it doesn't pose trip hazards.
And that you don't.
You're not expanding the life of that concrete by grinding it.
Well, but otherwise, if they called you up today and it's a 5-year and you're not in your 10-year cycle and they say there's a tripping hazard, without grinding, you need to go out and you would potentially replace it.
No. What we do now is if we get a call out of area, and if it's a significant issue, we will temporarily ramp it with asphalt,
Oh, okay.
and then it gets put on the list. In every program year, we have what are called out of areas, and we have a list, and the contractor knows that. So, if we're up on the northwest side, but we got a call southeast, they go down
And replace it.
right, and fully assessed, same as if they were in the project.
Right, so you are replacing it before its 10-year lifespan. All I was thinking,
I mean, I don't know that it's accurate to say 10-year lifespan. We're replacing it prior to our next rotation of evaluation.
so now would you grind? That's my only question. Now, when those calls, under
Yes.
this,
We would give the homeowner that option. If it was not subject to replacement under the existing criteria, we would give them the option. We say, we can replace this or we can grind it.
thank you. And my last question, and then trustee Bachhorst, is if the motion carries, what is the opportunity to, rather than have 2 separate policies, have one?
I don't have a strong opinion on that.
So can I amend, like, trustee Bachhorst, and then trustee Warren, and then I'll make my amendment, but I do want to make an amendment. Trustee Bachhorst.
Well, I was gonna call the question.
Well, and that's why, I'll make my amendment. I'd like to amend the motion to approve, what was the original motion, I'm sorry?
The original motion was to approve the approval of the sidewalk grinding policy as a supplement to the 1995 concrete replacement criteria.
So, to approve the blah, blah, blah sidewalk
The sidewalk grinding policy?
by, or can I strike and say by incorporating into the VLC policy?
If that's what you want to do.
I don't know how to word that, Attorney Graham.
Because all you're trying to do is just copy the language into the 1995 concrete
Yep, and
replacement
anything that needs,
criteria.
yep, just put them together.
And then, why don't we, just for clarity,
Sure.
restate the amendment?
I'm asking you to state it.
I was trying to take a note on it, but you know, really, the purpose and intent of the game is just to set it, it's the same terms and conditions except for
Just incorporate it into one policy.
incorporating it in one policy. So it would be, the amendment would be,
What's the policy?
Yeah, is the concrete replacement criteria a policy?
It says
It's a
approved.
policy, is it?
Yeah, you'd almost want to probably put the criteria into the
Okay.
policy. I mean,
Either way.
if she just says that she moves to amend the motion to incorporate the criteria into the policy, would that suffice?
yeah, I think that's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's, does that, well, actually, let me ask, does that?
Yeah, as long as there's
Where's
one.
the reply?
Yeah.
Can I make a quick request? You think that you
Yeah.
can say, Leanne, this is not appropriate at this time. When I was looking through, when all the policies were renumbered, this one never got a number.
So there is a policy, okay.
So I jumped the new request to 37, but there is no existing 36. So would this be an appropriate time to name concrete replacement criteria as number 36? Or not?
Sure.
Well,
So that's just an administrative task, yeah.
great. So I have a motion to amend. Do you want to read that back?
President Rosick moved to amend the motion to incorporate the criteria into the policy.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Trustee Warren, did you have anything?
I was gonna second it.
Okay. And I am going to vote for it, although I think we'll eventually get back to the assessment versus non-assessment on sidewalks during budget. Yes, Attorney Barrett?
Oh, no, I haven't.
No? Okay. Trustee Maher?
It's not assessed, but they pays.
Right, it's by statute, you can't assess for grinding.
Yeah,
State's-
that was a question. By state statute, it says, no, you can't, and then it says, and then we're going to send them a bill for grinding.
No, we are not sending them a bill. So
Okay.
our intent is that everyone receives a notice of preliminary assessment. The homeowners that have a stone that is a candidate for grinding will get another letter with that notice that says, if you prefer to do this, you need to let us know, and we'll do that. Then the assessment would be wiped out.
For that particular stone.
For that
So
particular
that's
stone,
residential.
they may have others, and those, that assessment would stand.
So the default setting is still replacement unless the homeowner
Right.
opts out.
They have to opt in.
Yeah, or opt in, right. Well, opts out of the replacement.
Or that.
Depending on how he is.
And if they were all on the tax roll, then it would be, if every sidewalk being instead of assessments, we put it in the tax roll, then we would be in charge of deciding. I mean,
We don't need to
Yeah,
discuss that
okay.
now.
Yeah.
thank you. All right. Did you have something to say?
I'm good.
Okay,
You take vote.
so we have a amendment and a second.
So you're voting on the amendment.
So we're voting on the amendment. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. And now can you please read the amended motion and we'll take a vote.
So I have trustee McCaig, trustee Buckers moved, second by trustee McCaig for the approval of the sidewalk grinding policy with the 1995 concrete replacement criteria included in the policy.
Reverse.
Because there was a policy, Leanne said it's just not.
You're incorporating new criteria into the existing, which is the reverse of what you just read.
So, and remembering it, number 36. Number 6.
Yeah, I'm confused now because, I mean, it's still gonna be the sidewalk grinding policy number 36.
Nope. It's going to be.
Concrete replacement criteria will be number 36.
Concrete
Oh,
replacement policy.
Oh, I'm with you now. Okay, so I'll say the concrete replacement.
Policy. Right, it's a policy.
Yeah. With the sidewalk grinding
Concrete grinding criteria.
criteria included. Great.
Okay, does anybody need to read that? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you very much. Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next item on the agenda is consider results of the RFP for riparian land management plan and award of contract. This is meeting number 2 on this issue. Sure. Just a minute, excuse.
Yep, you.
Okay, does trustee Maher, you want to do any brief introduction?
Sure. When we got the new trail along the river, in our budget discussions, we discussed the need for a land management plan. That was part of the original riparian trail plan, that after construction there would be a land management plan developed, so that we can manage the project and the vegetation there. We went out to bids as authorized by the board. We got 3 bids back for the development of a land management plan for the area east of the Oak Creek Trail off of the property that the village owns. We got 3 responses. We interviewed two of the the vendors proposing. OTI provided a proposal, and Eco Resources Consulting provided a proposal, and Applied Ecological Services provided a proposal. I, including village manager Ewald and also the new village horticulturalist in Habeneck, participated in the interviews. We were very impressed with OTI. The primary project person from OTI was participated in the original riparian plan, Kristen, for that project, and both her and the biologist that would be working on the project were knew the site, knew what they would be going out looking for, and very would do a good job. They also had a lot of understood that there's, besides just identifying the plants and doing that part, it's the public policy and how you're going to implement that. And they really got that. So they were real impressed. Also, OTI had proposed two environments, biological surveys for the, what was the other one? Applied Ecological Services. They were proposing one survey, which would not catch the early ephemerals, would be some of those. And so the OTI would get the whole range of plants, and they also are very familiar with the area. So that the interview team is recommending that the board approve OTI as the vendor. It is slightly higher than the other Applied Ecological Surveys. OTI is at $14,941. Applied Ecological Surveys are at $10,380. Applied Ecological Surveys are they're more focused on just simple, let's count the plants, field biologists, I would say, and not the whole range of, okay, what's involved, and that's what I think we need help with too, is because the Parks Commission is really kind of new in the village to really managing land management, what policies are needed by the implemented by the Parks Commission to manage this resource. And so that they would provide that to us. So the interview team is recommending OTI as the chosen vendor for the project.
Thank you for that summary.
Yeah.
Trustee McKay?
I was gonna make a motion.
I have a question, but you're free to make the motion first.
I move that the village accept the proposal of OTI for the development of a riparian land management plan and authorize execution of a professional services agreement upon review of the village attorney.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? So is there stated, I know we're moving along with our RFP evaluation criteria, was there any matrix or criteria stated for evaluation of this, for this RFP, the contracts or the proposals?
I thought there was.
And if so, it's okay for this time, but I'm just wondering, in the last RFP we did for transportation, and it was included in the packet, so if there was criteria it was evaluated on, it's a simple, 5-thing matrix. I think Rebecca was working on that, so if there was for the next one, that'd be helpful. And I would recommend that we have that for every evaluation process. My other question is, another note, the fiscal note section heading is missing, and so I missed that was the fiscal note section. We were just talking about that in committee, so if we can put that back on there, just the bold section heading.
I apologize, that was my error.
It's okay, sometimes they're attached and for now, and sometimes they're in the section, and so it just makes it flow smoother. My question is about the financing. I don't understand, the 10,000 was approved by the board, and I'm okay with 15, I just want to understand this better, as we discussed in our committee meeting, talking about fiscal notes. The 10,000 was allocated in our 2019 TID budget for this study, but yet there was an extra 5,000 in a line item, was that extra 5,000 already there from prior, or was that during 2019 that we threw it in there?
The 2019 TID budget, the line item that this would be paid for, survey studies and plans, the adopted budget included an allocation of $15,000. Of that 15, 10 was earmarked for this project. The other 5 was not identified for a specific purpose. I was told by Mark that it was included as a contingency.
Yeah, I just don't remember that, and it's fine, but I just don't remember doing that during the budget cycle. Okay.
Just
Anything
like,
else?
there was
Trustee Martin?
7 selection criteria in the RFP, that essentially, their ability to complete the project on time for their professional experience. And so there was set criteria that
You guys
we
went.
reviewed.
Okay. All right, anything else? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is consider any request from school district relative to 2019 and 2020 crossing guards. Yes. Let's take a bio break with the rest of the board. It's 9:03 and we'll be back by 9:13. Give me a minute or two.
I'll update you.
I'm going to be there on Wednesday.